You are listening to Wild HOA Situations. The HOA tried to weaponize towing. Karen slammed a laminated policy sheet against my windshield and screamed that the fine was automatic and the tow was optional. You missed the deadline and now you get the consequences, she said, jabbing her finger at the permit decal stuck to my glass, like it was evidence of a felony. I stood there in the Maplewood Commons HOA parking lot, Newark, Delaware, holding my car key fob so hard the plastic bit into my palm. And I tried to keep my voice level. I work as a public works field crew lead, so I know what counts as public right-of-way and what does not, and this street was public property. Patricia Williams, the community standards chair, did not care. She had a tight gray ponytail, a white cardigan, and a small handheld stamp she kept slamming onto papers like it was a gavel. She also had a reputation for inventing guidelines on the fly and calling them official. Patricia pointed at the decal again. That is a guest pass, not a resident permit. Your friend parked here for 2 hours yesterday during the moving truck unload, and you did not request advance approval. I applied for a temporary permit 3 weeks ago, I said. I have the email confirmation. She waved her hand like she was swatting a fly. The email does not count. You need the physical sticker, and you need board pre-approval for any commercial vehicle, which includes moving trucks. We can tow first and explain later. That is how enforcement works. That line, the one about towing first, stuck in my head. I knew I would need it later. Patricia pulled out her phone and made a call right there. Yes, this is Patricia Williams with Maplewood Commons. I need a tow for an unauthorized guest vehicle at Lot B, Space 12. Immediate pickup, please. I felt my chest tighten. My landlord had already warned me that any HOA violations would go on my file, and if I accumulated 3 strikes, I would be in breach of my lease. I had been dealing with strict lender requirements on a property purchase that was supposed to close in 2 months, and any HOA paperwork chaos could tank the whole deal. The stakes were real, and Patricia knew it. She ended the call and smiled. The truck will be here in 20 minutes. You can either pay the fine now and cancel the tow, or you can pay the fine plus towing and storage fees later. Your choice. I pulled out my phone and opened my email. I have the confirmation. I sent it to the management office on the 15th. I even got a reply saying it was received. Patricia shrugged. The office does not process guest permits. The board does. And the board meets once a month. You missed the deadline. The deadline was not published anywhere, I said. She tapped her stamp against her clipboard. Ignorance of policy is not an excuse. I will make an example out of you so everyone learns. I heard the sound before I saw it. A maintenance worker in a reflective vest was standing near the curb, watching silently. He did not say anything, but his eyes flicked toward Patricia and then back to me. I got the sense he had seen this show before. Patricia was already walking toward my car with a bright yellow tire clamp in her hands. She knelt down at the front wheel and started positioning it. Wait, I said. You cannot clamp my car. This is public street parking. She did not look up. This section of the street falls under HOA jurisdiction per the master deed. We have enforcement authority. I pulled up the county GIS map on my phone and zoomed in. The property line ended at the curb. The street itself was county maintenance. Patricia clicked the clamp into place and stood up. The clamp stays until the fine is paid. $500. $500, I said. Violation fee plus administrative processing. She pulled a small handheld stamp from her pocket and pressed it onto a yellow slip of paper, then slapped the paper under my wiper blade. No readable text, just official-looking blocks of ink. I took a photo of the clamp, the slip, and Patricia standing next to my car. She noticed and frowned. Recording me without consent is harassment, she said. I am documenting an HOA action on public property, I replied. That is allowed. She turned and walked back toward the clubhouse, her key ring jingling. She had too many keys on that ring, like each one unlocked a different drawer full of violations. I heard her mutter something about escalation protocols. I called my friend Mike, who works as a notary and has helped me organize documents before. He answered on the second ring. She clamped your car, he said, half laughing. She called a tow truck too, I said. I need to get ahead of this before it turns into a lien. Mike told me to meet him at his office in an hour. He said he could help me draft a formal appeal and get everything notarized so it would hold up in any hearing. I agreed, but I knew I had a bigger problem. The management office had a regional supervisor who only visited on Fridays, and today was Friday. If I did not catch them before they left at 5, I would lose a full week. I checked my watch. It was 3:30. I called the management office and got voicemail. I left a message explaining the situation and asking for an emergency callback. Then I called the tow company directly. The dispatcher told me the truck was already en route and that I would need to speak with Patricia to cancel the order. I asked for the driver's name and the authorization number. The dispatcher hesitated, then said the policy was confidential and hung up. Confidential? I muttered. I turned around and saw the tow truck pulling into the lot. It was a white flatbed with amber lights flashing. The driver climbed out, a guy in his 40s with a clipboard and a handheld scanner. He walked toward my car without making eye contact. I stepped in front of him. Hey, can I see the authorization? I said. He stopped and glanced at his clipboard. Got a call from the HOA. Vehicle is unauthorized in a restricted zone. This is public street parking, I said. Check the county records. He shrugged. I just go where they tell me. You have a problem, call the office. I pulled out my phone and showed him the GIS map. The property line is here. The street is county. The HOA does not have jurisdiction. He looked at the map, then at Patricia, who was walking back toward us with her arms crossed. The driver scratched his head. Look, I will call my boss. If there is a question about jurisdiction, I need confirmation. Patricia stepped closer. There is no question. The authorization is valid. Hook the car. The driver looked uncomfortable. He pulled out his phone and made a call. I heard him explain the situation. Then he paused and said, Yeah, she says it is HOA property, but the guy has a county map showing otherwise. There was a long silence. Then the driver said, Okay, I will wait for clarification. He hung up and looked at Patricia. My boss says I need a signed authorization from the property manager, not just a phone call. Patricia's face turned red. I am the community standards chair. I have enforcement authority. The driver held up his hands. I understand, but company policy says I need a signature. If you can get the property manager to sign off, I will hook it right now. Patricia pulled out her phone and started typing furiously. I will make an example out of you so everyone learns, she said, glaring at me. I stayed quiet. I knew that if I pushed too hard, she would escalate even further. I needed to let her think she was winning while I built my case. The driver leaned against his truck and crossed his arms. He kept glancing at Patricia like he was waiting for her to explode. 5 minutes later, Patricia's phone rang. She answered and her expression changed from anger to confusion. She said, What do you mean you need board approval? I am on the board. She listened for a moment, then said, Fine, I will call an emergency meeting. She hung up and looked at the driver. Unhook the clamp. We are handling this through official channels. The driver raised an eyebrow. You want me to remove the clamp? Yes, Patricia said. We will issue a formal notice and proceed with a hearing. The driver shook his head. I do not have the key for the clamp. That is your equipment. Patricia froze. She looked at the clamp, then at me, then back at the driver. I thought you brought the clamp, she said. The driver pointed at her. You put it on. I almost laughed. Patricia had locked my car with her own clamp and did not have the key. Patricia walked over to the clamp and tugged on it. It did not budge. She pulled out her key ring and started trying different keys. None of them worked. Where is the key? I asked. Patricia did not answer. She kept trying keys, her face getting redder with each failed attempt. The maintenance worker in the reflective vest finally spoke up. You left it in the clubhouse office. I saw you put it on the desk. Patricia glared at him. Then go get it. The worker shrugged. I am on lunch break. Patricia stormed off toward the clubhouse, her key ring jingling with every step. The tow driver looked at me. You have some kind of documentation for this? I do, I said. I am meeting with a notary in an hour to get everything organized. Good, he said. Because this is turning into a mess, and I do not want to be in the middle of it. Patricia returned 10 minutes later with a small key. She knelt down and unlocked the clamp, then stood up and pointed at me. This is not over. You will receive a formal notice of violation within 24 hours, and you will be required to attend a hearing. What is the violation? I asked. Unauthorized guest parking, unapproved commercial vehicle access, and failure to comply with community standards. I did not fail to comply, I said. I submitted the paperwork. You ignored it. Patricia smiled. The board will determine that at the hearing. She walked away. The tow driver shook his head and climbed back into his truck, and I was left standing in the parking lot with my car finally free. I drove to Mike's office and laid out everything. He listened, took notes, and then pulled out a folder. You need to request a copy of the HOA's enforcement policy, he said. If they are claiming jurisdiction over public property, they need to prove it. And if they find you without giving you a chance to respond, that is a due process violation. I also need to know who authorized the tow, I said. The driver said he needed a signature, but Patricia just called it in. Mike nodded. That is where you build your case. If she acted outside her authority, the board has to answer for it. He helped me draft a formal appeal letter, and he notarized 3 copies, one for the HOA, one for the management company, and one for my records. I sent the appeal by certified mail that afternoon. I also filed a complaint with the county about the clamp being placed on public property. I did not know if it would go anywhere, but I wanted a paper trail. The next day, I received an email from Patricia. It was sent to every resident in the community. Attention Maplewood Commons residents. A member of our community has repeatedly violated guest parking policies and has refused to comply with enforcement actions. This behavior undermines the standards that keep our neighborhoods safe and attractive. Please be reminded that all residents are required to follow HOA guidelines, and failure to do so will result in fines, towing, and potential legal action. Thank you for your cooperation. If you are enjoying this story, hit the like button and subscribe so you do not miss what happens next. I read the email 3 times. Patricia had not named me, but everyone would know who she was talking about. She was trying to turn the neighborhood against me before the hearing even started. I forwarded the email to Mike. He called me 5 minutes later. She just made a huge mistake, he said. She is accusing you publicly without giving you a chance to defend yourself. That is defamation, and it is also evidence that the HOA is not following fair procedures. Can I use this at the hearing? I asked. Absolutely, Mike said. Print it out, Bring copies and make sure the board sees it. I also started getting texts from neighbors. One asked if I was the one causing trouble. Another said Patricia had been targeting people for years and that I should fight back. A third neighbor, a woman named Sandra who lived 2 streets over, said she had been fined for a guest parking violation last year and had never received a hearing. She offered to testify if I needed a witness. I thanked her and added her contact to my file. 2 days later, I received a formal notice of violation in the mail. It listed 3 charges: unauthorized guest parking, unapproved commercial vehicle access, and obstruction of enforcement. The fine was now $750. I called Mike again. He told me to attend the hearing, stay calm, and present my evidence in order. He also said he would come with me as my advocate. The hearing was scheduled for the following Tuesday at 7 in the evening. It would be held in the clubhouse conference room, and I was instructed to arrive 15 minutes early. I spent the weekend organizing my documents. I had the original permit application, the email confirmation, the county GIS map, photos of the clamp and the tow truck, the defamatory email Patricia had sent to the community, and witness contact information from Sandra. I also had something else. Something I had not told anyone yet. 3 weeks ago, when I first submitted the guest permit application, I had sent it by certified mail as well as email. I had the receipt and the delivery confirmation. The management office had signed for it on the 16th. I had requested a copy of the HOA's enforcement policy at the same time, and I had the signed receipt for that too. The office had never responded to either request. I had sent follow-up letters on the 23rd and the 30th. Both were delivered and signed for. Both were ignored. I acted like I was backing down, because timing was the whole weapon. I did not want Patricia to know I had proof until I was in front of the board. Tuesday arrived. I dressed in clean clothes, grabbed my folder, and drove to the clubhouse. Mike met me in the parking lot. "Ready?" he asked. I nodded. We walked inside. The conference room was small, with a long table and 8 chairs. 5 board members were seated on one side. Patricia was at the head of the table. The other members included a man in his 60s named Tom, a woman in her 50s named Claire, and 2 others I did not recognize. Patricia looked at me and smiled. "Thank you for coming. Please have a seat." I sat down across from the board. Mike sat next to me. Patricia opened a folder and pulled out a copy of my violation notice. "We are here to address multiple infractions related to guest parking and enforcement compliance. The board has reviewed the evidence and determined that the violations are valid. However, we are willing to hear your response before issuing a final decision." I pulled out my folder and placed it on the table. I submitted a guest permit application 3 weeks ago. I have the email confirmation and the certified mail receipt showing it was delivered and signed for by the management office. Patricia waved her hand. "The management office does not process guest permits. The board does." "I understand," I said. "But the board is required to respond within 10 business days per the HOA governing documents. I never received a response." Tom leaned forward. "What is the basis for that claim?" I pulled out a copy of the bylaws and pointed to Section 14. "It says here that all permit applications must be acknowledged within 10 business days, and that failure to respond constitutes approval." Patricia's smile faded. "That section applies to architectural modifications, not guest permits." I turned to the next page. Section 18 extends the same rule to all permit applications, including guest parking, special events, and temporary access. Claire looked at Patricia. "Did we receive his application?" Patricia hesitated. "We receive dozens of applications every month. I cannot confirm whether this specific one was processed." I pulled out the certified mail receipts. I have proof that the application was delivered on the 16th and that I sent follow-up requests on the 23rd and the 30th. All three were signed for by the management office. I handed copies of the receipts to each board member. Tom studied the receipts, then looked at Patricia. Why did we not respond? Patricia shifted in her chair. The office has been understaffed. That does not excuse ignoring a resident's request, Tom said. Patricia's face turned red. The violation stands regardless. He allowed a guest to park in a restricted zone without board approval. I pulled out the county GIS map. This is the property boundary. The street where my car was parked is public right-of-way, not HOA property. The clamp and the tow attempt were illegal. Claire took the map and compared it to the HOA site plan. He is right. The property line ends at the curb. Patricia slammed her hand on the table. The master deed grants us enforcement authority over adjacent streets. I pulled out another document. I requested a copy of the master deed 3 weeks ago. I never received it. Can you provide it now? Patricia did not answer. Tom looked at the other board members. Does anyone have a copy of the master deed? No one spoke. I continued. I also have an email that was sent to the entire community accusing me of violating policies without naming me specifically. That email was sent before this hearing, which suggests the board had already decided the outcome. I handed copies of the email to each board member. Tom read it and frowned. Patricia, did you send this? Patricia crossed her arms. I sent a reminder to the community about parking policies. You accused a resident publicly before the hearing, Tom said. That is inappropriate. Claire nodded. I agree. This hearing should have been conducted fairly, and it was not. Patricia stood up. I am the Community Standards Chair, and I have the authority to enforce policies as I see fit. If the board has a problem with that, then you can vote me out. Tom looked at me. Do you have any other evidence? I do, I said. But I would like to request an emergency hearing with the regional property manager present. There are additional issues that need to be addressed at a higher level. Tom agreed. He said the regional manager could meet on Thursday afternoon. I thanked the board and left the room with Mike. Outside, Mike grinned. You just backed her into a corner. I am not done yet, I said. Thursday came fast. I arrived at the management office at 2 in the afternoon. The regional supervisor was a woman in her 50s named Ellen. She had a no-nonsense expression and a tablet full of notes. Tom and Claire were there. Patricia was there too, sitting with her arms crossed. Ellen opened the meeting by asking me to present my case. I went through everything again. The permit application, the certified mail receipts, the county map, the defamatory email, and the ignored requests for the master deed and enforcement policy. Ellen listened, took notes, and then turned to Patricia. Why did the office not respond to his requests? Patricia said, the office was understaffed. Ellen frowned. That is not acceptable. Residents have a right to access governing documents, and the HOA is required to respond to permit applications. If you did not have the capacity to process his request, you should have notified him and provided a timeline. Patricia did not respond. Ellen turned to me. You mentioned a tow attempt. Can you provide details? I pulled out the photos of the tow truck and the tire clamp. Patricia called a tow company and instructed them to hook my car without a signed authorization. The driver refused when I showed him the county map proving the street was public property. Patricia also placed a tire clamp on my car without legal authority. Ellen looked at Patricia. Did you place the clamp? Yes, Patricia said. It is standard enforcement procedure. On public property, Ellen said. Patricia hesitated. Ellen turned back to me. Do you have the name of the tow company? I do, I said. I also have the driver's contact information. Ellen wrote it down. I will follow up with them directly. Then I pulled out the big one. I also have a chain of certified letters proving that the HOA received my application and my requests for governing documents, and that the board fined me anyway without responding. I request an emergency hearing to present this evidence in full, because it shows a pattern of retaliation and policy abuse. I handed Ellen a clean packet with every certified mail receipt, every ignored follow-up, and a timeline showing how Patricia had escalated the fines even after I submitted proof of compliance. Ellen reviewed the packet in silence. Then she looked at Patricia. This is a serious problem. You fined a resident without giving him a chance to respond. You placed a clamp on public property. You called a tow without proper authorization. And you sent a defamatory email to the community before the hearing. All of these actions violate HOA policy and state law. Patricia stood up. I was enforcing community standards. You were abusing your authority, Ellen said. Tom and Claire nodded. Ellen turned to me. I am recommending that the board reverse all fines, issue a formal apology, and open an investigation into enforcement practices. I am also recommending that the tow contract be reviewed, because if the company was pressured into accepting unauthorized requests, that is a liability issue for the HOA. I request an incident number, I said. I want this on the record. Ellen nodded. I will issue a report and provide you with a reference number by the end of the week. The next day, I received a call from the tow company owner. He said he wanted to meet in person to discuss the incident. I agreed and met him at a diner near the office. The owner, a guy named Rick, sat across from me with a coffee and a folder. He looked tired. I want to be straight with you, Rick said. Patricia called our office 3 times in the last month trying to get us to tow cars without signed authorizations. My drivers have been uncomfortable with it, and now I know why. What did she say? I asked. She told them to hook first and ask questions later. She said the HOA would cover any liability. But we do not work that way, and I do not want my company caught in the middle of an HOA power trip. Rick opened his folder and pulled out a call log. I have records of every conversation, including the one where she promised extra fees if the driver hooked your car without verifying jurisdiction. I stared at him. She offered extra fees. Rick nodded. She said the HOA had a budget for enforcement incentives. I told her we do not take kickbacks, but she kept pushing. When your situation came up, one of my drivers called me because he did not trust the authorization. That is when I told him to wait for a signed document. Can you testify to that? I asked. Rick nodded. I already told the regional manager. I am also terminating our contract with Maplewood Commons. I do not work with clients who try to manipulate my drivers. I thanked Rick and told him I would include his testimony in my formal complaint. The following Tuesday, the board held an emergency meeting. Ellen was there, along with Tom, Claire, the 2 other board members, and Patricia. Ellen opened the meeting by reading her report. She detailed every violation, every ignored request, and every piece of evidence I had submitted. Then she presented Rick's testimony about the tow company and the pressure Patricia had applied. Patricia sat in silence, her face pale. Tom spoke first. I move that we reverse all fines against the resident and issue a formal apology. Claire seconded. The vote passed 4-1. Patricia was the only dissenting vote. Then Ellen addressed the tow contract. Based on the testimony from the tow company owner, I recommend that the board terminate the current contract immediately and open a competitive bidding process for a new vendor. I also recommend that the board adopt a policy requiring written authorization for all towing actions, with copies provided to affected residents within 24 hours. Tom moved to adopt the recommendation. Claire seconded. The vote passed 4-1 again. Then Tom turned to Patricia. I also move that we remove you as Community Standards Chair, effective immediately. Claire seconded. Patricia stood up. You cannot do this. I have been on this board for 6 years. Tom said, and you have abused your authority for at least part of that time. The evidence is clear. You fined a resident without due process. You placed a clamp on public property. You called a tow without authorization, and you pressured a vendor to act outside their policy. That is not enforcement. That is retaliation. The vote passed 4-1. Patricia grabbed her folder and walked out of the room without another word. Ellen turned to me. I want to apologize on behalf of the management company. This should never have happened. We will be conducting a full audit of enforcement actions over the last 2 years to identify any other cases where residents were treated unfairly. I thanked her and left the meeting. 2 weeks later, I received a formal letter from the board. It included an apology, a confirmation that all fines had been reversed, and a check reimbursing me for the costs I had incurred during the dispute. The letter also included a copy of the revised enforcement policy, which required written authorization, resident notification, and a right to appeal before any towing action could take place. Sandra, the neighbor who had offered to testify, sent me a text. She said the board had reached out to her and other residents who had been fined under Patricia's watch, and that they were all receiving refunds and apologies. Mike called me to congratulate me. You did not just win your case, he said. You changed the policy for everyone. A month later, the HOA held its annual election. Patricia ran for re-election to the board. She lost by a landslide. Tom was re-elected, and 2 new members joined who had campaigned on transparency and fair enforcement. The new board held a town hall meeting to discuss the revised policies. I attended and listened as residents asked questions and shared their own stories about enforcement overreach. The board committed to quarterly audits and to publishing all enforcement actions in the monthly newsletter. I also learned that Rick, the tow company owner, had been hired by 2 other HOAs in the area after word spread about his refusal to participate in unauthorized towing. He sent me a thank you note saying that standing up to Patricia had actually helped his business. I ran into Patricia once more, about 6 weeks after the board meeting. I was getting my mail at the community mailbox when she walked past. She did not say anything, but she gave me a look that could have stripped paint. I did not say anything either. I just went back to my car and drove home. The best part came a few months later. The board voted to require actual evidence before fines, and they adopted a rule that any board member accused of retaliation would face an automatic review. The vote was unanimous. Patricia did not attend that meeting. I heard through Sandra that Patricia had been outvoted so hard the room laughed, and that she had submitted her resignation from the HOA entirely shortly after. The tow contract was awarded to a new company with a transparent fee structure and a policy that required resident contact before any hook. The new vendor posted their authorization process on the HOA website, and the board added a section to the community newsletter explaining residents' rights during enforcement actions. I closed on my property purchase without any HOA paperwork issues. My landlord was impressed that I had resolved the dispute so cleanly, and he offered to extend my lease if I ever wanted to stay longer. I thanked him, but said I was ready to move into my own place. The neighborhood felt different after that. People started saying hello again. The community Facebook group, which had been full of complaints and arguments, turned into a place where residents shared recipes and asked for recommendations. The new board members were active and responsive, and they held office hours every week for anyone who had questions. I kept my folder of documents in case I ever needed it again, but I never did. The new enforcement policy worked exactly as it was supposed to. Residents received written notice, they had a chance to respond, and fines were only issued after a hearing. Mike framed the certified mail receipt and hung it in his office as a reminder that documentation wins cases. He told me he had started advising other clients to keep meticulous records, and that my case had become his go-to example. Sandra and I became friends. She introduced me to other neighbors who had been targeted by Patricia over the years, and we formed a small group that attended board meetings and asked tough questions when policies seemed unfair. The board welcomed the scrutiny and said it kept them accountable. I never saw Patricia at another meeting. I heard she moved to a different neighborhood, one without an HOA. I hope she learned something, but I doubt it. I hope this story made your day a little better.